Before we begin, no matter where you are on your journey, take this as a heartfelt reminder to keep moving forward. If this message resonates with you, we invite you to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring content. Manager laughed at the poor black janitor. 5 minutes later, she fired him on the spot. The morning sunlight spilled through the tall glass windows of the Collington Plaza, catching on the polished tiles of the lobby floor. It was just after 8 o'clock a.m., and the building was waking up, heels clicking, doors swishing, coffee machines sputtering to life. In the far corner, near the service elevator, James stood quietly, pushing his mop in steady arcs across the already clean tiles. He was in his mid-50s, tall but slightly stooped from years of manual work, with weathered hands that knew the weight of a mop handle better than most people knew the weight of their phones. His overalls were clean but faded, his name stitched in red cursive above the breast pocket, James. The new manager, Karen Myers, had been strutting through the building for 3 days now, her sharp heels announcing her presence before her voice even did. She was young, early 30s, with an expensive bob haircut and an even more expensive sense of self-importance. She had taken over from Mr. Bennett, the kind older gentleman who'd run the building for nearly 2 decades. Karen's management style was different. Her voice carried across rooms, sharp with judgment, often accompanied by a laugh that wasn't entirely friendly. This morning, she stopped just a few feet from James, wrinkling her nose at the mop bucket beside him. "Oh, wow," she said loudly, glancing at 2 receptionists nearby. "Guess the help hasn't upgraded since the 80s. What is this, James? A museum piece?" James looked up slowly, his eyes warm but unreadable. "It works just fine," he said softly. Karen smirked, tilting her head as though she were speaking to a child. "Sure it does. And maybe someday you can save up for one of those fancy spin mops they have now. Who knows, right?" The receptionists shifted uncomfortably, but neither said a word. Karen laughed, a sharp, self-satisfied sound, and sauntered toward the elevator. James dipped his mop back into the bucket and kept working. He didn't respond. That was the thing about James. He never seemed rattled. People had mistaken that for weakness before. They were usually wrong. By mid-morning, the building was humming with activity. James moved from the lobby to the service hallway, checking supplies. He passed staff members who greeted him with small nods or whispered, "Morning," though some still carried a hint of Karen's dismissive attitude in their tone. James didn't mind. He had been underestimated his entire life, and he had long ago stopped feeling the need to explain himself. Karen, however, wasn't done with him. At around 10:15, she appeared in the hallway, her heels clicking fast, a clipboard in hand. "James," she called sharply, "are you working back here or just hiding?" James looked up from the shelf he was restocking. "Just making sure everything's stocked for the day, ma'am." "Mm-hmm," Karen said, stepping closer. "I'll be checking the cameras later. We can't afford to have people slacking off on company time, not on my watch." She glanced toward the open door at the end of the hallway. "What's that? You having some kind of meeting?" Her tone was mocking, as if the idea was absurd. James glanced toward the door. "Just a quick conversation." Karen rolled her eyes and strode past him, heels echoing in the narrow space. But when she stepped into the small conference room, her voice faltered. Sitting at the table was a tall man in a tailored suit, Mr. Harrington, the regional director of the Collington chain. The man was in mid-conversation with James, who was seated across from him with a folder of documents open in front of him. James glanced toward the door. "Just a quick conversation." Karen rolled her eyes and strode past him, heels echoing in the narrow space. But when she stepped into the small conference room, her voice faltered. Sitting at the table was a tall man in a tailored suit, Mr. Harrington, the regional director of the Collington chain. The man was in mid-conversation with James, who was seated across from him with a folder of documents open in front of him. "Ah, Karen," Mr. Harrington said, standing to shake her hand. "Good to see you. I was just going over the property upgrade proposals with James here." Karen blinked. "Proposals? With him?" She laughed lightly as though it was a joke she didn't understand. Yes, Harrington said simply. James is one of the co-owners of Clean Co., the company contracted for all our building maintenance. More importantly, he's also a co-owner of this building. He gestured around. We've been discussing a few changes to improve both tenant satisfaction and operational efficiency. Karen's face paled slightly. I didn't realize. James closed the folder calmly. It's not something I advertise, he said with a small smile. I like to work alongside my staff. It keeps me grounded. Mr. Harrington turned to James. One more thing. I've heard some concerning reports about the work environment since the management change. I value your opinion. Do you think Karen should remain as building manager? The silence stretched. Karen looked at James, her confident smirk nowhere in sight. James held her gaze for a moment before answering. I believe respect should be mutual, but it's not here. Harrington nodded once. Karen, please collect your things. We'll arrange for your departure today. Karen's mouth opened as if to protest, but no words came. Her cheeks flushed crimson as she turned on her heel and left the room without another word. The sound of her heels on the tile seemed sharper now, almost frantic. James stayed seated for a moment, letting the weight of the moment settle. When Harrington had gone, James walked back to the lobby. The same two receptionists were there, their eyes wide with shock. They didn't say anything, just watched as James picked up his mop again and resumed his steady, unhurried strokes. As he worked, a young courier who had seen the exchange earlier whispered, Man, you're the landlord? James looked up, a faint smile on his lips. Titles don't matter much, he said. How you treat people does. The camera would linger on him there, the light catching in his eyes before fading to black. Over the fade, a voiceover would say, Don't mistake quiet for powerless. Don't mistake humility for weakness. Everyone you meet knows something you don't, and they might just be the one signing your paycheck. The end screen would appear with the moral spelled out. Respect everyone. Always. The janitor who owned the company. The first week after Karen's abrupt departure felt different. The air in Callington Plaza's lobby seemed lighter, the tightness in people's shoulders a little less noticeable. Still, rumors swirled in hushed voices about who the next manager would be, about what James had said to the regional director, and most of all, about who James really was. Some thought he must have won the lottery years ago. Others whispered about hidden connections and silent partnerships. Nobody seemed to have the full story, and James wasn't offering one. He just kept doing his work, same as before, polishing the brass door handles, mopping the marble floor, and nodding warmly to every person who passed by. Then came the morning the new manager arrived. It was just past 8:30 when a sleek black sedan pulled up outside. From it stepped a tall woman in a gray blazer, her dark hair pulled into a no-nonsense bun. She walked with quick, decisive strides, a leather-bound notebook in one hand. Her name was Marissa Cole. Inside, she introduced herself to the front desk staff, her voice clear and professional. I've been asked to step in as interim building manager. My job is to make sure things run smoothly and to address any issues, quickly. She smiled briefly, but her eyes scanned the lobby with the alertness of someone who saw problems before they happened. Her gaze landed on James, who was buffing a fingerprint smudge off the glass entrance door. And you must be James, she said. James looked up, his expression calm. That's me. I've heard you've been here a long time, Marissa said, glancing at her notebook. That means you probably know this building better than anyone. James gave a small nod. I know a few of its quirks. Marissa smiled politely, but there was something in her tone, measured, guarded. She didn't dismiss him like Karen had, but she clearly saw him as just another staff member. Well, I believe in teamwork. I'll expect everyone to give 100%. If I notice any slacking, I won't hesitate to make changes. James simply said, Understood. For the first few days, Marissa kept her distance. She was efficient, making changes to schedules, sending out new memos, and reorganizing supply orders. James noticed she watched him more than the others, subtly, but enough for him to feel her evaluating him. On Thursday afternoon, the building's fire alarm went off unexpectedly. Staff and tenants spilled into the street, murmuring in confusion. Marissa emerged, her blazer slightly rumpled, looking irritated. "False alarm," the head of maintenance called. "Faulty sensor in the east stairwell." But when James slipped back inside to check, he found more than a faulty sensor. The wiring in the stairwell's fire panel was dangerously frayed. It was a small miracle it hadn't sparked into something worse. James went straight to the electrical room and shut down the affected circuits. He made a quick call on his personal phone, not to a repair company, but to a number he rarely used. Within 20 minutes, a licensed electrician arrived, tools in hand. Marissa appeared just as the electrician was finishing. "Who authorized this?" she demanded. "I did," James said evenly. Her eyes narrowed. "This kind of work needs management approval." James gestured toward the frayed wiring now safely replaced. "If we'd waited for paperwork, we might have been standing in ashes by morning." Marissa crossed her arms. "You overstepped." Before James could answer, Mr. Harrington appeared from down the hall. "Actually, Marissa, James has full authority to address building safety concerns. His company handles our maintenance contract, and he's also one of our landlords." Marissa's eyebrows shot up. "Landlord?" Harrington smiled faintly. "Yes, you'll find James has a vested interest in this place running well." Marissa looked at James with a mix of surprise and something else. Respect, maybe. "I see," she said softly. Over the next week, her approach shifted. She began asking James for advice on repairs and tenant issues. She noticed how he spoke to the cleaning staff by name, asked after their families, and stepped in to help when anyone was short-handed. One evening, Marissa found herself standing with James at the lobby's front doors, watching the rain fall. "You know," she said slowly, "I thought you were just a janitor who took his job too seriously. I didn't realize you, well, had so much at stake." James smiled faintly. "Everyone has something at stake. Just because you don't see it doesn't mean it's not there." The real test came the following Monday. A tenant in the building, a high-profile marketing firm, called to complain that their floor hadn't been cleaned to their standards over the weekend. Marissa started to draft a warning for the cleaning crew, but James asked to speak to the tenant himself. He went upstairs, knocked on the firm's door, and was met by a man in an expensive suit who looked him up and down with thinly veiled disdain. "You're the cleaner?" the man asked. "I'm James," he said calmly. "I understand you had a concern." The man launched into a list of petty grievances, smudges on glass, a stale smell in the conference room. James listened without interrupting, then asked if he could walk through the space. As they toured, James quietly noted a half-dozen issues unrelated to cleaning, like a vent clogged with dust because the tenant had blocked access for months. When they finished, James spoke plainly. "We'll address the glass and the scent, but the vent is a fire hazard. I'll arrange to have it fixed, at no cost to you." The tenant's tone softened. "That would be appreciated." By the end of the week, the marketing firm had sent an email to Marissa praising James's professionalism and offering to recommend CleanCo to other businesses. Late Friday afternoon, as the building emptied for the weekend, Marissa found James in the service hallway. "You handled that tenant perfectly," she said. "I've worked in property management for years, and I've never seen someone diffuse a complaint like that." James just shrugged. "It's not about winning the argument, it's about finding the solution." Marissa looked at him for a long moment. "I think I'm starting to understand why everyone speaks so highly of you." James smiled slightly. "It's not about how they speak of me. It's about how they feel when I leave the room." The episode would end with a slow shot of James locking the building's front doors, the rain now replaced by a clear golden sunset. A voiceover would say, "Sometimes the people you think are beneath you are the ones holding you up. Respect isn't earned through titles. It's earned through actions. Boardroom shock. The janitor see. Tea at the table. The morning began with a strange buzz in the air at Callington Plaza. Tenants were dressed sharper than usual, and the top-floor conference room, rarely used, was set with crystal water glasses, gleaming folders, and a row of leather-backed chairs. Word traveled fast. The annual regional board meeting was being held in the building. James didn't pay much mind at first. Big meetings came and went. His job was to make sure the building looked perfect. By 8 o'clock a.m., he'd polished the brass elevator doors, checked the coffee service twice, and made a mental note to replace a flickering light outside the boardroom. He was mopping the lobby when Marissa approached. "James, can I talk to you a second?" He leaned the mop against the wall. "Sure." Her tone was lower than usual, almost nervous. "Look, the board is intense. If you're up on the executive floor today, maybe just stay in the service hallways? They can be—" She hesitated, searching for a diplomatic word. "Distracted." James's expression didn't change. "I'll be careful." Marissa gave a quick nod and walked away, already scanning her clipboard. By 9:15, the elevator chimed with the arrival of dark suits and polished shoes. The regional board members filed in, accompanied by Mr. Harrington, the regional director, and 2 vice presidents James hadn't seen before. They headed straight for the top floor. James stayed on the main level for a while, replacing a ceiling tile and greeting a courier. But just before 10 o'clock, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Harrington. "Need you upstairs. Conference room A. Bring your property portfolio." When James arrived on the top floor, the atmosphere was tense. Through the boardroom's glass walls, he could see executives seated around the table, flipping through documents. Marissa stood just outside, clipboard clutched tight. "You got invited up here?" she asked, Ked, eyes flicking to the folder in his hand. "Apparently," James said simply. She opened her mouth to say something, but the boardroom door swung open, and Harrington's voice carried out. "James, right on time. Come in." Inside, the room was quiet except for the shuffle of papers. Every seat was filled, except the one at the head of the table. Harrington gestured toward it. "This one's yours." James walked calmly to the seat, set down his folder, and took his place. No one missed the sight of the man in janitor overalls sitting where the chairperson usually sat. A silver-haired board member leaned toward Harrington, his voice low but audible. "Who exactly is this?" Harrington smiled faintly. "James Thomas, co-owner of this property, partner in Clean Co., our exclusive maintenance provider across the district. And," he turned toward James, "our newest minority shareholder in the Callington chain." The silence was sharp enough to cut paper. One of the vice presidents cleared his throat. "You clean the building?" James met his gaze steadily. "I maintain it. I also help manage the maintenance for 32 other buildings, but I prefer to see things from the ground level. You learn more when people think you're not watching." The silver-haired member let out a soft laugh, shaking his head. "Well, I'll be." The meeting began, and James participated with quiet authority. He spoke about tenant satisfaction scores, long-term repair savings, and how small investments, like better air filtration, improved productivity. At first, some members glanced at him skeptically, but as the discussion went on, they began directing questions to him directly. Midway through, a debate broke out about cutting back on janitorial hours to save costs. A tall man in a navy suit insisted it would improve efficiency. James listened, then said calmly, "You can cut hours, but you'll spend twice as much fixing damage from neglect. You'll lose tenants who notice the difference, and you'll never calculate the cost of the respect you lose when staff are treated as disposable." The room went quiet again. Then the silver-haired member said, "Point taken." After 2 hours, the meeting wrapped. As the board members filed out, several stopped to shake James's hand. One even clapped him on the shoulder. Harrington lingered behind. "Well," he said, "I think that went well." James gave a faint smile. I think they'll be treating the janitorial staff a little differently. Marissa, who had been standing outside the door the whole time, stepped in slowly. Her voice was low. I had no idea. James looked at her evenly. It's not about who I am. It's about remembering that anyone could be sitting at this table. You just might not know it yet. The final shot would linger on James leaving the boardroom, not with swagger, but with the same steady, unhurried walk he always had. Voiceover. Power isn't always loud. Sometimes it's the quiet presence at the table that changes everything. When the health inspector was the janitor's friend, it was a Tuesday morning in Collington Plaza, and the aroma of fresh coffee drifted through the lobby. James was on the mezzanine level, quietly replacing a flickering light bulb near the entrance to La Belle Cuisine, the high-end French restaurant that occupied the prime ground-floor corner of the building. Chef André, the head chef and owner, was in rare form, storming in and out of the kitchen, barking orders in his thick Parisian accent and making the waitstaff scurry like startled mice. He was a brilliant chef, no doubt, but humility wasn't on the menu. James had seen his type before. André was polite to wealthy customers and anyone in a suit, but to anyone in a uniform like James's, he treated them like they were invisible, or worse, a nuisance. That morning, as James stepped into the kitchen to check a water leak near the prep sink, André caught sight of him. Non, 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 he snapped, waving his hands. You can not be in here during service prep. You will make everything dirty with your mop business. James paused, holding the wrench he'd brought to fix the leak. There's a pipe under the sink about to burst. If I don't fix it now, you might have a flood on your hands. André scoffed, looking James up and down. Flood? Bah! You people always exaggerate. And anyway, this is my kitchen. I will decide what needs fixing. James simply nodded and left, making a mental note. Sometimes it was better to let reality do the teaching. Around 11 o'clock a.m., a tall, sharp-eyed woman in a city-issued jacket walked into the lobby. She greeted James warmly. Hey, stranger, heard you were here? James smiled. Inspector Reyes. It's been a while. 3 years, she said. But you look exactly the same. Still keeping this place spotless? I try, James replied. Reyes tapped her clipboard. Routine check on the food establishments today. Guess I'll start with the French place. When they walked into La Belle Cuisine together, André's demeanor shifted immediately upon seeing the inspector's badge. Ah, Inspector. Welcome, welcome. Please, anything you need, you just tell me. We run a perfect kitchen here. Reyes smiled politely. I'll be the judge of that. James stood near the door, about to leave, but Reyes said, Actually, James, why don't you join me? 2 sets of eyes are better than 1. André blinked. The janitor? In my kitchen inspection? James is more than qualified to notice safety issues, Reyes said matter-of-factly. In fact, I trust his judgment. The color drained slightly from André's face. They began the inspection. At first, everything looked fine. Spotless counters, neatly labeled ingredients, shiny utensils. But then James quietly pointed toward the prep sink. Might want to check that. Reyes crouched down, shone her flashlight, and whistled. André, you've got active leakage here. Looks like it's been going for a while. Standing water's a breeding. Ground for bacteria. André stammered. Oh, we were just about to fix that. James said nothing. As the inspection continued, Reyes noticed several violations James subtly drew her attention to. A container of seafood stored above fresh produce, a fridge running 2 degrees too warm, and, most damning, a box of cleaning chemicals stored next to dry goods. By the time they were done, André's confident swagger had melted into a nervous slump. Reyes handed him a notice. You're on conditional compliance. You have 1 week to correct these issues or face a temporary closure. André took the paper with trembling fingers. Yes, Inspector. Of course. As they left the restaurant, Reyes turned to James. You knew about the sink, didn't you? James shrugged. Tried to fix it this morning. Got told I'd make the kitchen dirty. Reyes smirked. Well, looks like the kitchen was already doing a fine job of that on its own. The scene would cut to James later that afternoon, tightening the pipe under the sink while Andre hovered nearby, uncharacteristically quiet. When James finished, Andre muttered, "Merci, James." James just nodded, wiping his hands. A clean kitchen starts with clean respect. Final shot. James walking out of La Belle Cuisine as the lunchtime crowd arrives, Reyes calling after him, "See you around, partner." Voiceover. Disrespect blinds you. Respect opens your eyes, and sometimes keeps your doors open. The janitor's son, from custodian's kid to Harvard scholar, it was a gray, rainy Thursday when James walked into the lobby carrying something he rarely brought to work, a neatly wrapped lunch in a small cooler bag. He usually ate in the staff break room, but today he was meeting someone. At 12:15 sharp, the front doors opened and in came a young man in a hoodie, jeans, and worn sneakers. His hair was neatly trimmed, his smile easy, and his eyes sharp and curious. This was Malik Thomas, James's only son. "Hey, Dad," Malik said, shaking off raindrops. "Hey, son, you hungry?" James asked. "Always," Malik grinned. They settled into a corner table in the lobby cafe. James unpacked sandwiches, fruit, and thermoses of soup. Malik was telling his father about a class project when a voice interrupted. "Well, well," came the sneer from the next table. "If it isn't our friendly janitor having a little family day." The voice belonged to Ms. Temple, a tenant from the third floor. She ran an upscale marketing consultancy and was known for her barely concealed contempt toward support staff. Today, she was dressed in a designer coat, her latte perched beside a laptop plastered with luxury brand stickers. She eyed Malik's hoodie and sneakers. "And who's this? Your apprentice in mopping?" James's jaw tightened slightly. "This is my son." "Oh," she said with a fake smile. "Well, I suppose it's good for young people to see the realities of life early. Maybe he'll get inspired to do something more ambitious." Malik opened his mouth, but James gave him a subtle glance that said, "Let it go." They finished lunch quietly. Ms. Temple sipped her coffee, clearly pleased with herself. That afternoon, Malik stayed to study in the cafe while James finished his rounds. Just before 3 p.m., a small crowd began to gather near the lobby's central screen, the building's digital board where announcements and news scrolled throughout the day. The screen flickered, and up popped a news segment titled, "Local Teen Accepted into All 8 Ivy League Schools." The video began, showing photos of Malik in a cap and gown, holding debate trophies, standing beside a science fair project that had won statewide recognition. The reporter's voice rang out, "Malik Thomas, son of longtime community leader James Thomas, has achieved a rare academic feat, acceptance into all 8 Ivy League universities, including Harvard, Yale, and Princeton." Gasps and murmurs rippled through the crowd. The camera cut back to Malik in the cafe, suddenly the center of attention. He shifted uncomfortably as strangers congratulated him. Ms. Temple approached, her face frozen somewhere between shock and embarrassment. You're that Malik?" Malik smiled politely. "Yes, ma'am." I didn't realize," she stammered. "That's incredible." James had walked up by now, standing quietly at his son's side. "You didn't have to realize," he said gently. "Respect isn't based on resumes." Ms. Temple looked down at her latte. "You're right. I apologize." Later, as the building emptied for the day, James and Malik stood at the front doors. Malik chuckled softly. "You didn't tell me they'd put me on the big screen." "I didn't," James said. "Sometimes the best lessons teach themselves." The episode would end with a slow shot of Malik walking out into the rainy evening, the Harvard acceptance letter peeking from his backpack. James watched him go, a quiet pride in his eyes. Voiceover. Never measure a person's worth by what you see in front of you. Greatness often grows where you least expect it. Eviction notice turned promotion letter, The late afternoon sun filtered through the tall lobby windows, catching dust motes in its golden light. James was doing a slow sweep of the marble floors when the voice hit him from across the room, sharp, clipped, and impatient. "You! Yes, you! Janitor guy!" James turned to see Victor Renshaw, a sharply dressed man in a navy suit with a silk pocket square. He was the newly arrived CEO of a startup that had leased an entire floor of the building just 2 months earlier. From day one, Victor had treated the place like his personal kingdom. "Do you work here or just stand around polishing the same tile?" Victor barked, waving a paper in his hand. James stepped closer, calm as ever. "Can I help you with something, sir?" "You can start by explaining this filth in our service corridor," Victor said, thrusting the paper toward him. "It's a formal complaint to building management. I want your supervisor to know this is unacceptable. In fact," he glanced at the letterhead, "I'm recommending your removal from the premises. If it were up to me, you'd be out today." A few people in the lobby froze mid-step, their conversations dying out. James glanced at the paper. It was an eviction request addressed to building management, citing unprofessional conduct and obstruction of operations. James met Victor's stare. "I see." Victor smirked, clearly expecting an argument. "And before you go running to your little union rep or whatever, let me save you the trouble. My company pays premium rent here. That means I get a say in who stays and who goes. And I'm saying you go." At that moment, Marissa emerged from the elevator, holding a thick manila folder. She spotted the standoff instantly. "What's going on?" Victor turned toward her. "Perfect timing. I'm lodging a formal complaint against your janitor here. He's interfering with my operations, and I want him gone." Marissa raised an eyebrow, then glanced at James. "Is that so?" James said nothing, simply holding Victor's gaze. Before Marissa could respond, the elevator doors opened again, and out stepped Mr. Harrington, followed by 2 members of the building's ownership group. Harrington's eyes swept the scene. "Problem?" Victor jumped in. "Yes, there's a problem. This janitor is unprofessional, and I've requested his immediate removal." The ownership group member, a tall woman in her 50s, turned to James. "What do you think of that, James?" James took a small step forward. "I think tenants should feel comfortable bringing concerns to management. I also think they should know who they're speaking to when they try to evict someone." "But," Victor's smirk faltered. "What's that supposed to mean?" The tall woman extended her hand toward Victor. "I'm Eleanor Shaw, part owner of this building, and James Thomas here," she smiled faintly, "is not only our head of contracted maintenance services, but also one of your landlords." The silence was instant and absolute. The receptionist at the desk stopped typing. Someone in the cafe put down their cup mid-sip. Victor blinked like he'd just been slapped. "Landlord? Him?" Harrington's tone was smooth but firm. "Yes, and he's the one who signs off on all tenant lease renewals, including yours." Victor's jaw opened and closed, searching for a response. James took the eviction request from Victor's hand, looked it over, then calmly tore it in half. "I appreciate feedback," he said evenly, "but disrespect is a different matter. I think we should schedule a meeting about how your company uses the building's shared spaces." Victor nodded stiffly, the cocky confidence gone. "Of course, Mr. Thomas." The next week, a notice appeared in the building's email newsletter. "Congratulations to Victor Renshaw, newly appointed to the Tenant Engagement Committee, working directly with building ownership to maintain harmonious operations." Translation: the man who tried to throw James out now had to work for him on building-wide initiatives. The episode's final shot would show James walking through the lobby a few days later, passing Victor, who gave him a small, tight nod of respect. James nodded back without slowing his pace. Voiceover: "When you try to push someone out, make sure you know who holds the door." The investor. Nobody saw coming. It was a crisp Friday morning when James stepped into Crescent Bank Trust, a sleek, glass-fronted building just a few blocks from Callington Plaza. He'd finished his early rounds at the property and was wearing his work overalls, A2, while pouch still clipped at his waist. In one hand, he carried a plain leather folder, worn at the edges, the kind most people wouldn't give a second look. Inside were documents that could change the future of 3 properties in the district. James approached the reception desk. "Morning," he said warmly. "I'm here to open a new account and speak with an investment advisor." The young woman behind the desk gave a tight smile. "Do you have an appointment?" "No," James replied, "but I was hoping to meet with someone today." She tapped on her keyboard, glancing him over in the process. Her eyes lingered on the faint scuff marks on his boots. "We're pretty booked. Maybe you could fill out this basic account form and we'll call you back in a week or 2. Before James could answer, a man in a tailored suit approached. He was tall, thin, with a perfectly knotted tie and a name tag that read Mr. Larkin, Senior Account Manager. "Is there an issue here?" Larkin asked. The receptionist hesitated. "This gentleman wants to speak to an advisor today." Larkin's smile was practiced, but his tone had an edge. "Sir, just so you're aware, our investment services typically cater to clients with significant assets. The minimum portfolio we work with starts at $500,000. Our retail banking team is down the hall if you're just looking to open a checking account." James's expression didn't change. "I understand. I'd still like to speak to an advisor." Larkin let out a small, polite chuckle, the kind that really wasn't polite at all. "It's not really how we do things here. Our advisor's time is valuable, and we prioritize clients who are prepared." James raised an eyebrow. "Prepared?" "You know," Larkin said, lowering his voice slightly. "Clients who've done the groundwork, the kind who don't come in straight from a job site." A few heads turned. A woman in line frowned at the exchange. James simply said, "All right, why don't you check if your schedule can handle me for a few minutes?" Larkin sighed, but finally relented, leading James to a private office. He motioned toward the guest chair. "So, let's make this quick. What exactly do you have in mind?" James set the leather folder on the desk, opened it, and began laying out documents. Property deeds, ownership certificates, dividend statements. Larkin's polite smirk began to slip. "These," James said, "are 3 fully owned commercial properties, all debt-free. Each is under long-term lease to national tenants. I'm looking to move liquid assets from their operating accounts into a managed investment portfolio, starting with $2.4 million. The silence was deafening. Larkin stared at the papers, his mouth slightly open. 2.4. "Yes," James said calmly. "To start, there will be more in the next quarter." From the doorway came a new voice. "Mr. Thomas?" A woman in a navy pantsuit appeared, her hand extended. "I'm Dana Pierce, head of our private wealth division. I'll be taking over from here." Larkin's eyes darted between them. "Of course, Ms. Pierce, Thank you, Larkin," Dana said smoothly, her tone making it clear he was dismissed. An hour later, James left the bank with a portfolio packet in hand and Dana's direct line saved in his phone. She'd walked him to the door herself, promising VIP service from this point forward. As James stepped back into the sunlight, he passed Larkin at the reception desk. The younger man looked up, his face flushed. "Mr. Thomas, James paused. "Don't worry about it. Just remember, clients don't always dress for the part." Final shot. James walking away down the street, his reflection in the bank's glass doors stretching tall behind him. Voiceover. "Wealth doesn't always announce itself, but disrespect always does, and it's more expensive than you think." The Janitor Who Stopped a Robbery. It was a quiet Wednesday afternoon at Collington Plaza. The lobby hummed softly, with the sound of the espresso machine in the cafe and the occasional echo of heels on marble. James was in the corner near the front doors, polishing the glass until it gleamed. At 2:13 p.m., the piece shattered. 2 men burst through the doors, one tall and wiry with a black hoodie pulled tight over his face, the other shorter but broader, wearing a baseball cap and carrying a backpack. The tall one held something small and metallic in his hand, waving it at the cafe cashier. "Empty the register," he barked. "Now!" Gasps filled the lobby. A barista froze mid-step. Someone near the elevators ducked behind a column. Marissa, standing at the front desk, instinctively reached for the phone but stopped when the shorter man snarled, "Nobody calls anyone." James didn't move at first. His eyes tracked their movements, calculating, calm. The tall one was jittery, his hand shaking as he gestured with the weapon. The shorter one kept glancing toward the doors, shifting his weight nervously. When the cashier's hands fumbled with the register, the tall one slammed his free hand on the counter. "Hurry up! You think I'm playing?" That was when James stepped forward. "Hey," he said evenly, his voice cutting through the tension. "You don't want to do this." Both men snapped toward him. The shorter one barked, "Stay back, old man." James kept walking, slow and deliberate. "You're nervous. I get it. But you've already got cameras on you from 4 angles, and that door's got a timed lock. Security can shut it in 10 seconds. If you run now, you might walk away clean." The tall man's eyes flickered toward the corners of the lobby where, sure enough, cameras gleamed. He shifted his weight. "Shut up." James took one more step forward, now close enough that his voice dropped to a low, steady tone only they could hear. "You're not going to hurt anyone, because deep down you know this isn't who you are. Put the bag down, and you can walk out before the police make it here." Something in his calmness cut through their panic. The shorter man's breathing slowed. His grip on the bag loosened. "Man, let's just go," he muttered. The tall one hesitated, then cursed under his breath, shoved the small pistol into his hoodie pocket, and bolted for the door. The shorter one followed, dropping the bag on the way out. Within 30 seconds, the building's private security, already alerted by the front desk, sealed the doors and called the police. No one had been hurt. People emerged from hiding spots, murmuring in disbelief. The cafe cashier's hands were still trembling. You just walked right up to them," she said to James. James shrugged. "Sometimes you've just got to remind people they've still got a choice." When the police arrived, Marissa quietly filled them in on James's role. One officer, a tall man with a friendly grin, turned to him. "Mr. Thomas, didn't think we'd see you again so soon." A few tenants raised their eyebrows at that. "Again?" one whispered. The officer chuckled. "Yeah. Last year, James here stopped a break-in at one of our downtown properties. Made our job a lot easier." Eyes widened around the lobby. James simply nodded. "Just happened to be there at the right time?" Final shot. James returning to polishing the glass doors, his reflection overlapping with the red and blue flash of police lights outside. Voiceover. "Courage isn't about noise or show. It's about standing firm when everyone else steps back." The reporter who got the story wrong, it started with a phone call. James was cleaning the mezzanine railings when Marissa appeared, holding her phone like it was radioactive. "You might want to see this," she said, showing him the screen. The headline on the news site read, "Local janitor accused of abusing building resources. Tenants demand action." Beneath it was a grainy photo of James pushing his mop bucket through the lobby. The article painted him as someone using his position to linge or in tenant spaces and overstepping boundaries beyond his job description. Quotes from unnamed sources claimed he acted like he owned the building. James read it silently, his face giving nothing away. "Who wrote this?" "Some local lifestyle reporter, Emily Ross," Marissa said. "She's coming by later for a follow-up. I tried calling to set the record straight, but she's convinced this is a big exposé." That afternoon, the lobby buzzed with the click of camera shutters. Emily Ross arrived with a cameraman in tow, tall, mid-30s, dressed in chic business casual with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Mr. Thomas," she said, approaching him like a hunter spotting prey. "Care to comment on allegations you've been overstepping your role here?" "No," James replied calmly. "But I'd be happy to explain my role." "That's fine," Emily said brightly. We'll be doing the interview live from the lobby, more authentic. Within minutes, lights and cameras were set up near the cafe. Tenants gathered around, whispering. The red tally light blinked on. "Good afternoon," Emily began. "We're here with James Thomas, a janitor at Collington Plaza, where multiple tenants allege misuse of access and interference with business operations. Mr. Thomas, do you deny these allegations?" James tilted his head slightly. "I'm not here to deny or confirm gossip. I'm here to clarify." Emily's eyebrows lifted, sensing a moment. "Clarify?" "Yes," James said evenly. "I am contracted here through my company, Clean Co., to manage all maintenance operations. I also happen to co-own this property, as well as 31 others in the district. My role isn't about overstepping, it's about oversight. And sometimes that means stepping in to protect the building, its tenants, and its reputation." A ripple of murmurs ran through the gathered crowd. Emily's composure faltered. "You co-own the building?" "Yes," James said, "and I'm deeply proud of the work my staff and I do. We keep this place running. Without us, there's no lobby to broadcast from." From the edge of the crowd, Mr. Harrington stepped forward. "Everything Mr. Thomas said is true. He is one of the most respected members of our ownership group. These so-called sources clearly didn't know who they were talking about." Emily's smile wavered. "Well, this is certainly new information for our viewers." James leaned forward slightly. "It's not new. It's just the part of the story you didn't bother to check." The cameraman hesitated, then slowly swung the camera to capture the crowd, faces filled with newfound respect, a few even applauding softly. Emily cleared her throat. "Perhaps we'll be issuing a follow-up." James straightened. "Make sure it's the full story this time." Later that evening, the news station aired a revised segment. "Janitor or Owner? The Truth Behind Collington Plaza's Most Influential Figure." The clip went viral, comments flooding in about humility, assumptions, and the power of first impressions. Final shot. James back in the lobby the next morning, mop in hand, nodding at a tenant who now greeted him with a warm, "Morning, Mr. Thomas." Voiceover. "Before you write someone's story, make sure you know the whole chapter. Respect is the headline that lasts." From janitor to legend, the lobby of Collington Plaza had never been so full. Balloons bobbed gently near the ceiling, strings curling above a long buffet table, a banner stretched across the mezzanine. "Thank you, James Thomas. 35 years of service." It was late afternoon, and the golden light slanted through the windows, catching the gleam of the freshly polished marble floors. Floors James himself had cleaned that morning, despite protests from the staff. He stood near the center of the lobby now, not in his usual overalls, but in a tailored navy suit, the fit impeccable. The name tag on his lapel didn't say janitor. It simply said, James Thomas, co-owner. The Crow. D was a mix of familiar faces from over the years. Marissa stood by the microphone at the front, flipping through a small stack of note cards. Behind her, Mr. Harrington adjusted the mic stand and smiled toward James. "All right," Marissa said into the microphone. "Before we hear from James, a few people would like to say something." The first was Chef Andre from La Belle Cuisine, dressed in his crisp white coat. "James," he said, "when we first met, I was, how you say, not the nicest. But you showed me respect I didn't deserve. Because of you, my kitchen is better. Not just cleaner, but kinder." Next came Ms. Temple, the marketing consultant who once mocked Malik. She glanced at Malik now, tall, confident, wearing a Harvard tie. "I used to think I knew how to judge people. You proved me wrong, and I'll always be grateful for that." Victor Renshaw stepped up after her, clearing his throat. "I once tried to get this man thrown out of the building," he said plainly. "Now I consider him my mentor. Life has a funny way of humbling you." Even Emily Ross, the reporter, was there. "Journalism is about finding the truth," she said, "and sometimes the truth finds you. James, you didn't just change my story. You changed how I tell every story." One by one, people who had once dismissed or underestimated James stepped up, each sharing a memory of how he had, in his quiet way, altered their perspective. The younger staff listened wide-eyed, many hearing these stories for the first time. Finally, Marissa called James forward. He stepped up to the mic, looking over the crowd. He took a moment, long enough for the room to fall completely silent. "When I started here," James began, "I was just a kid with a mop and a dream of steady work. People didn't see much when they looked at me, and for a while that bothered me. But then I realized, what matters isn't what they see, it's what you do." He paused, scanning the faces. "Over the years, I've learned titles come and go, jobs change, but respect, real respect, isn't given because of what's on your business card. It's earned in how you treat people when no one's watching." A murmur of agreement rippled through the crowd. James smiled faintly. "Today, I leave this building in good hands. And I leave knowing something better, that I've been part of a community that learned, together, what respect can build." He stepped back from the mic, but Mr. Harrington motioned for him to stay put. "Before you go, James, there's one more thing." Harrington reached into an envelope and handed James a thick packet. James opened it, scanning the first page. His brow furrowed, then his eyes widened slightly. It was a deed, partial ownership of a new development downtown, gifted from the other owners as a thank you for his decades of service. The crowd erupted into applause. James shook his head with a soft chuckle. "Guess I'm not done working after all." The camera would linger on the final image, James standing at the lobby doors one last time, looking out over the city he'd helped keep standing, the sun setting behind him. Voiceover. "Respect everyone. Help when you can. Stand tall when you must. You never know who's watching or who you'll inspire." Fade to black. Series end.